Good afternoon, everybody, or good evening. This is Patrick from the Poison Pen Bookstore in Scottsdale, Arizona, and thanks for tuning into another virtual event. It is our pleasure to have Gigi Pandian with us today. She's going to be talking about her brand new book, The Raven Thief, and Gigi has kindly signed a batch of books for us. I'll go ahead and put a link if you'd like to purchase one in the comments field. And if you have questions for Gigi, go ahead and put them in, and Barbara will bring me back on screen towards the end of the hour. So Barbara, over to you.
Thank you, Patrick. This is really fun. I was so glad that I had a chance to meet Gigi in person at Left Coast Crime in Tucson, which is, something I used to think was just ordinary, but now it's harder work. And got to hear a great discussion about her books and why she writes them, which we'll get into. But let me introduce her, since we haven't actually done a virtual event together, have we, Gigi?
No, we haven't.
I
Yeah,
think so. All right.
I've done one with the store, but not with you directly. So this is great.
Well, I'm delighted. Well, let me just say a few words about Gigi, just kind of fill you all in if you're watching for the first time. So she is the USA Today best-selling, and unfortunately that's going away because the USA Today bestseller list has been canceled. But meanwhile, the USA Today best-selling and multiple award-winning author of the J.A. Jones Treasure Hunt mysteries, the Accidental Alchemist mysteries, and several locker room mystery short stories. And we're going to get into what a locker room mystery is. Her works have won her the Agatha Anthony Lefty and Derringer Awards. The Derringer Award is one you don't hear of that often, but it's for short stories, isn't it?
Yep.
So it's really cool for people who are adept enough to write short fiction, which is actually not in everybody's wheelhouse. And many novelists have found that trying to write short stories is tough. But obviously your mind works that way. And her debut novel was awarded the Malice Domestic grant. Now, you might want to explain that. That's a deal that Malice Domestic has with St. Martin's Press, if I remember correctly.
Actually, it's not. It's a different Malice Domestic one.
It
It's not the one that leads to a book coming out. It's the one that is a grant for unpublished mystery writers. Based on, I forget, it was so many years ago now, I forget if it was 50 or 100 pages of our work in progress. So I won their grant when I was unpublished and had just finished working on a draft and was so excited to have finished something. I sent it in, and winning their grant that year was the first thing that got me to take my writing seriously, to think, oh, maybe this should be more than a hobby, because they foster the next generation of traditional mystery writers. So like in the tradition of Agatha Christie, which is the style I like to think I write in. So that was great.
More like John Dixon Carr lately.
Oh, yes, but yes.
That's true.
Yeah.
Well, actually, Minotaur Books, which is a division of St. Martin's Press devoted to crime fiction, does have a grant that leads to a publishing contract for a new writer. It's called what? Best Traditional Mystery, Best Cozy Mystery, something along those lines.
I think it's Best Traditional, but yeah, they have.
I think it is too. And then they also have won a Tony Hillerman Prize. And we have a local author named Christina Estes, who is very excited to be the upcoming Tony Hillerman Prize author. And we've launched several because, Southwest, that's our thing. Hillerman Prize winners. So I think it's great that there are publisher and convention sponsored opportunities for authors, financial and otherwise. That's wonderful.
Yeah, and I'm really looking forward to reading Christina's book. She and I share an editor at Minotaur Books, but I haven't read an advanced copy of her book yet, but I'm eager to read her book.
I edited a very early draft, but I'm sure
wow.
I've gone through so many revisions by now that I may not quite recognize it. Christina is our local NPR reporter, and she's wonderful about covering events and other things at the store, and often my photographer, which is especially nice. So unsurprisingly, her book takes place in the world of journalism here in Phoenix. And I'll be excited to see. That's the interesting thing. Maybe some of you watching this don't realize is the book you read is not the book that is often the first, well, almost never is the first draft, but can go through many, many iterations. So when I say I read it a while back, it may have been rewritten several times. It may not even resemble the book that I read at this point to a great degree. So how many drafts do you go through?
That it's such a hard question to answer, because I'm a writer who starts writing on paper. And so even before I go to the computer, I fill at least one paper notebook with the rough sketch outline of a book, and so much character development and figuring out the plot and just random stretches of dialogue, really getting to know the characters. So when I move from paper to the computer, that's kind of like my first draft of editing, but it's also a first messy draft on the computer. And then I'll set it aside, send it to critique partners, go back to another notebook, working things out. But so like you said, the draft, my critique partners who read that early draft, they're not even going to recognize the final draft, even though they were instrumental in getting there. It's so many iterations to get to the final product, especially in mystery.
Yeah, it is. And what's also interesting, I certainly find it true of myself in writing all the, gazillion of review pages that I do all the time, is that, writing it by hand and then typing it in, you see things. I mean, it's complete. I find that even moving something from email into a Word document or vice versa is different. I mean, I can look at it and say, oh my God, how did I miss that? Or, what? So I think the more you can do that, I like your idea of writing it originally by hand and then putting it into a document. And the good news is that you can at least move things around once you type it in. That, is much harder to do. I mean, back in the old days when people typed their manuscripts, it was hell to do that. You had to like cut and paste or retype it. I worked my way through one of my graduate degrees, typing dissertations and master's theses. And, if you made a mistake, you had to go back and start over again. It was awful.
Yeah. I mean, the challenge though, is that sometimes I'll find myself pulling out my hair because I know I wrote a scene and I have no idea where it is. Is it in one of these notebooks? Is it in a computer file? Where is this? Did I dream it that I wrote this scene, or does it actually exist? That is the question.
Okay. So you have an indexing problem.
I do. I mean, it's still my process and I love it, but yeah, it's not always quite as organized as I would like it to be.
Right. So in 2022, Gigi wrote a book called Under Lock and Skeleton Key, which I really liked, and she was kind enough to sign it for us. And it starts a series, and there are many elements in it, and in the sequel, The Raven Thief, that I think we should talk about. So let's start out. As I mentioned to you before we started, you gave a really eloquent description of a locked room mystery at Left Coast Crime in Tucson. And I think it's really important for people to understand the thrust of a locked room mystery, which is really how the crime is committed. I mean, it's part of a larger book. It isn't like the entire book is focused, on how did the body in the lock study with the chimney blocked and the door bolted and the windows shuttered die. But the real question is, how did it happen? Whereas in, more traditional mystery, the focus is more on the motive and on, who did it. Sometimes in a locked room mystery, you even know who did it, but you don't know how they did it.
Yeah. And that's what I think is so fun about locked room mysteries. But before waxing on about why I love them, we will go over definitions first. So a locked room mystery really means that it is an seemingly impossible crime. And so they're impossible crime story and a locked room mystery and a miracle problem. Those terms all can be summed up to mean the same thing. Some purists, I know I have arguments with fellow locked room mystery fans. If an impossible crime and a locked room means the exact same thing, they are both impossible, but sometimes you can have an impossible crime that's like out in the open and not exactly a locked room. But the heart of a locked room mystery means that it is impossible, compared to a closed circle mystery, which is the type of mystery that people are at a secluded island and all the boats are gone. And so all the people start being murdered one by one, but that there's only 9 people on this island. And so it feels claustrophobic and that they're cut off from the world, but that's a closed circle. Same with people at a country house snowed in. that is a closed circle mystery because something is happening, but it doesn't look impossible necessarily. And that's, I think, where the confusion comes from, because there's a lot of overlap between the two. Often, if you have people at a secluded location, you can also have crimes that start seeming impossible. But really, a locked room mystery means that it is an impossible seeming crime. And the reason that the distinction is important, I think, is because they're different types of experiences. A closed circle mystery, it can be a traditional mystery and you still have all the fair play clues and everything, but really in a locked room mystery, it is all about the puzzle of not only who done it, but also how done it. And so it's such a fun puzzle because you have that added layer of not just who, but also how. And so it really is this open, ongoing question as you're solving the mystery. So if you're someone who loves puzzle plot, fair play mysteries, then locked room mysteries are such fun because you are trying to figure out how on earth the crime was committed.
I think where some of the confusion comes in is in Agatha Christie's book, And Then There Were None, which is basically a closed circle mystery with I can't remember how many people, on an island with no way on or off it. And then they die one by one and eventually all. And then it appears to be an impossible crime because there's no perpetrator. But then you discover, I won't give it away, that there actually was one. And I think that's why people often describe, that kind of island, like Alice Feeney's most recent book, for example. Daisy Darker is again like that. And Christie, I don't want to say she cheated because that's not true, but I mean, she wrote the first unreliable narrator book too in The Murder of Roger Ackroyd. So she's a real pioneer in interesting plots and left a legacy for other writers to follow. But I do think it's And Then There Were None that has led to that confusion.
Yeah, and I would consider And Then There Were None both closed circle and locked room because of that impossible thing. So that really is, I think that you're right, that one, because it has both overlapping so seamlessly, that really, that took off.
I think so. I think, you mentioned it, John Dixon Carr was an exponent in the golden age of, he was an American who moved to England, if I remember this right.
Yep.
And he loved the locked room puzzle. And he wrote many books in which he devised them. And of course, you have to, before you can do that, you have to figure out how the crime was accomplished. So, you can't be a pantser and write a locked room mystery, at least not the locked room part of it. You do have to know what's, how it's going to resolve when you get into it. And I've noticed that there are some other authors who gave it a try once. Reginald Hill wrote one once, the name of which I can't remember. He was a marvelous British writer and loved different forms and so forth. And I do recall there was a genuine locked room mystery in one of his novels, which was fun, but he didn't do it again because I suspect it was hard work. So what draws you to them?
So you brought up John Dixon Carr, and he was the author who inspired me to write locked room mysteries because I fell in love with his novels when I was a teenager, and also his short stories because locked room mysteries lend themselves wonderfully to the short form of mystery fiction. And the thing that really got me about his books and stories was not exactly the fact that it was a locked room puzzle, because for me, the puzzle isn't enough. If I only wanted a puzzle, I would do a crossword puzzle or another logic game, which are fun, but only fun to a certain degree for me. But what really elevates locked room mysteries like the ones by John Dixon Carr is that because the mystery is seemingly impossible, it looks like it is that only something supernatural could have committed the crime. And therefore, those stories lend themselves so beautifully to being a Gothic ghost story, in addition to a puzzle mystery. And I was also discovering, at the same time that I discovered John Dixon Carr, I was falling in love with Elizabeth Peters' books and also her Barbara Michaels books, which were Gothic. And even the Elizabeth Peters books have all of these, elements that, like knights and, that are like armor that's coming to life in these old Gothic castles and things. So I just like love that element of the spooky adventure, so that you can have a puzzling mystery, but you can also have this grand Gothic adventure at the same time. And that's what I find lacking in some locked room mysteries, that if it's only about the puzzle at the expense of the characters and at the expense of creating a real living setting, if you're only about the mechanics of it, then I would prefer that someone just go write brilliant crossword puzzles as opposed to having something that is a novel. And so John Dixon Carr really did it all. He had these larger than life characters, these settings where it looks like a ghost or a curse or something. And so that in my Secret Staircase mysteries, I have a supposed family curse that that is woven through the books. And so there are logical explanations to all of these books. It's not a spoiler to say that, because they are true locked room mysteries.
Right.
But I love weaving through that question, what if, could this be a real curse that is causing these things to happen?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of Poe in it, the Cask of Amontillado, for example, and all. And even though those weren't impossible crimes, they were really scary. I mean, I think that's a really horrible story if you think about it, being walled up like that. Oh, right. So the Gothic, because the reason I'm not looking at you is I'm looking up Martin Edwards, who does the British Library series, actually did an anthology called Miraculous Mysteries, which had locked room crimes in them. And I was hoping
it's right over there on my shelf.
Okay, so he's also, if I can read this tiny little print here, that people such as Arthur Conan Doyle, G.K. Chesterton, Dorothy Sayers, and Marjorie Allingham, he cites them as, having written the so-called impossible crimes. Marjorie Allingham has one that's really terrifying, and it ends up with the detective scaling a tower. And all the way through the book, there's this horrible thing, that, and most of the time when you get to the horrible thing, you're disappointed, right? It almost never lives up to being the scary thing that, you've followed through the book. In this book, the name of which I can't remember, by Allingham, it actually is wonderful. It's really scary when they climb the tower and look in the window and, there it is. So it isn't an impossible crime, but I think the Golden Age really loved, sensationalism. It really liked books that were out of the ordinary way. It wasn't just some like boring, old man declaring he was going to remarry and eliminate all his heirs and somebody poisons him at dinner, ho hum. So.
Yeah. No, so many of my favorite books and are from the Golden Age, but I love that so many of them are being reprinted now and are back in print, because I've read so many old used paperbacks that I found that were falling apart when I read them. So I had to decide, am I going to read this book, even though it will ruin this old paperback? But now I don't have to make that choice, because there's so many things coming back in print, which is so exciting for, new generations to be able to discover the best lost classics from that era.
And actually the pandemic fostered a real interest in classics, not just crime classics, but lots of classics. But I'm really pleased that Poison Pen Press did bring the British Library crime classics to the United States. And then we added the Library of Congress crime classics, which are basically American. And Otto Penzler is doing American mystery classics. And HarperCollins, which has in its vaults lots of Golden Age mysteries, because they locked up an awful lot of, mystery writers. They have republished collections of classic crimes and so forth. So, there's really quite a lot. Actually, an interesting question is, when does somebody become a classic? I can say Marjorie Allingham is a classic and Josephine Tay is a classic, but how do we decide that P.D. James is now a classic? It's an interesting question. It's sort of like the same question is, where do you draw the line now with historical mystery? You were at Left Cross Crime with Laurie R. King, who's Back to the Garden is set in the 1970s. And I realized that when I started the Poison Pen in 1989, the 1920s was roughly 50 years back. And that was what we considered historical mystery, maybe nudging into the 30s. Now, in 1923, I realized that Laurie's book is 50 years ago. And so the line for historical fiction has moved up. Which I think is, I mean, that's one of the great things about crime fiction. It's mutable. It constantly does things. So other elements that you like to include in your books, you also gave a very moving discussion about characters that look and are like you, are not just sort of standard characters. What did you mean by that?
So my dad, it was born and raised in the southern tip of India and came to the United States when he was 30 years old. And he just came for grad school, but he met my mom in grad school. And so he stayed. And so I grew up in a multicultural household and in Southern California. And so our neighborhood was diverse, and I come from a multicultural family. And when I was young, I devoured mystery fiction. I loved it all. And it's one of those things where you never are aware of what you're missing at a time when you don't see something. And so I just, as I got older, I realized that I never saw characters who reflected me and my family in fiction. And so I wanted to write my own spin on the books that I loved when I was growing up. And so my own spin meant many different things. So in terms of locked room mysteries, I wanted to update them by trying to not do something that I had ever read, but, something that I could, do that was unique, and have characters that were developed more than they were in some locked room mystery fiction from the golden age. Not as, John Dixon Carr is amazing, so obviously I can't do better than him, but, and that I also wanted to have diverse characters who reflected more of my own life experience. And so in the Secret Staircase mysteries, Tempest Raj comes from a multicultural family. And so I'm able to have, she just considers herself a multicultural Californian, which I do. But there's different characters that are in her life. Her dad and her grandparents and her friends are just representative of people that, not based on specific people, except for her grandpa Ash, who's Tamil, and immigrated to Scotland and then the United States. I will admit he is based on my dad, because my dad is the kind of guy who will, if he meets you at a bus stop within 5 minutes, he will know your entire life story and will have invited you home for dinner and cook you this huge spread of food. And so Tempest's grandfather, I get to have all of this food from different cultures, and her grandfather always feeding everyone at Fiddler's Folly, which is the quirky architectural house that the extended family lives in. So I had so much fun just playing with being able to have, different cultural traditions and food bringing everybody together as a layer to the background of the story.
Well, food is certainly important in your books, and actually it can make you quite hungry while you're reading them, but I really enjoyed that. But another feature, I think the Secret Staircase is a wonderful series title. It just evokes so many different reactions and emotions, but to make that work, you have to have architecture. So what is it that the family, what business is it they're engaged in?
Yeah, so Secret Staircase Construction builds architectural misdirection into houses. They are a home renovation company that their specialty is sliding bookcases, hidden rooms, anything that really brings magic into people's homes through different interior architectural elements. And I loved creating this as the family business for Tempest family for two reasons. The first of which is that Tempest is a stage magician, or I should say she was, because this is the setup before the series opens, she was a very successful stage illusionist in Las Vegas, but her career is sabotaged. So she moves back home into her childhood bedroom. But it's a pretty cool childhood bedroom because she has her own secret staircase. So, she shouldn't be complaining too much. But stage magicians were much more common mystery fiction characters in the golden age of detective fiction than they are now, because of that parallel that magicians create misdirection. So they are perfect characters to see through seemingly impossible crimes. Because if someone has committed a seemingly impossible crime, they are really they have created some serious misdirection here. So I find the idea of having a magician character just such fun with how they can investigate misdirection. So this home renovation company, I feel like, to me, they create architectural misdirection. So like a fireplace that, just looks like a generic fireplace, but, you hit a brick and, something magical happens there. So that idea was just such fun to me, in the parallels between what's happening in the plot. But then also, when I was a kid, being an architect was the first job that I ever wanted. Like when I was little, I was not a kid who played with dolls. I was a kid who built things everywhere. But, life never goes as planned. So I didn't end up becoming an architect. But that's the cool thing about fiction, is that we can do all these things that were the paths not taken. I can live vicariously in my fiction now.
That's a wonderful thought. So I tend to think of them as illusionists, because a locked room mystery is somebody has created an illusion. And I think that there was a huge thing after the First World War, and a rise of spiritualism and illusionism. I mean, in California, I can't remember the name of that woman that had that enormous following, and she apparently disappeared into the Pacific Ocean and came back, but it was in the 1920s in Los Angeles. And, people were so... Thank you, M.A. Simple McPherson. Patrick always saves me with the chat function. Thank you, Patrick. Exactly. And I think part of that was a reaction to the horrors of the First World War, that people wanted to have these, comfort illusions, whatever you want. But anyway, illusionists do make wonderful characters in locked room mysteries. But if you think about it, the secret staircase thing has a long tradition. I mean, you can think about priest holes, you can think about, I'm trying to remember, there was a name for, doors and walls in like French chateaus, so that the doors didn't actually show, but it was for the servants, to move in and out of. There were secret staircases, there were secret passages, there were smugglers doing underground passages, there were passages in the walls of the castles, all the rest of it. So, it's harder in modern architecture. I mean, you're not building a castle. So, you don't have as much room, you don't have the stonework and all the rest of it to create all this. But don't you think, I mean, even tree houses have been fun for, illusionists and sort of secret things. So I love the modern spin on what's really a very old thing, which is hidden features in a residence, where people can, they can do a lot of things. They can do sinister things. They can just do mundane things, everybody.
No, I'm really having so much fun, because I really, when I started writing the series, I feel like I'm paying homage to my favorite books that I read when I was younger. So in terms of all of those Gothic novels where you do have a castle with this secret passageway and things, that I can bring that into the modern world and give some magic there.
Well, you can, but even Greg Hurwitz in the Orphan X books, in his fabulous apartment, Orphan, has a shower, and behind the shower is, his safe room, or his, room with all his fascinating stuff in it. So he has a hidden room right there in his very modern apartment. The question I've always wondered is, it used to be oftentimes that when that kind of thing was created, like let's say the pyramid, where there's the chamber for they killed the people who built it so that they couldn't, then rat it out. And I'm not sure how Evan, what did he do? Did he kill the people that, built the secret room so it would remain secret? Because if there's somebody loose, who can tell. So
my guess is that he probably had different people do different things, so nobody had all the information. So
yeah,
there
but
you
they
go.
knew he was there.
Oh yeah, no, that's true. That's
Right.
true.
So in your case, you handled that by having the secret staircase construction company. So, there are people with different skills who come together to build these rooms. And it's not really intended to be the sort of thing that Evan builds, is it?
No, it's not a safe room.
fun.
They're like a fun hidden thing.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that I have, like Tempa's dad always insists on, that there be a non-secret exit to the room. So even though to get in, you might have to do something cool, but to get out, as a safety measure, there's just a way to get out. So, the voice of reason, so it's not all magical fun. It's also up to building code and being safe for,
Does
modern
the
age.
state of California have to come and inspect? They probably do. See how it all works out. I can't believe what we went through to install a generator after California's awful experience, with fires and power going out. We decided that we would have a generator, and I'm telling you, it was worse than building a house.
No, I know. We looked into building code stuff because another wish fulfillment thing is because I'm in the Bay Area in California. So it's a very small house. So not room for any secret rooms. But we did look into if I could build like a writing office in the backyard. And it was just going to be such like a headache figuring everything out. So instead, I have this nice little room with bay windows that I made into my study here now that my husband and I are both working from home. So we had to make it work. So I have my bookcases and my bay window. So I'm all set for my writing studio in the house.
Nice. I have at least 3 British authors when I Zoom with them. They're in their, what they call their garden shed, which I assume is their way of getting around code. Is that they just have created an office back in the shed, presumably where the garden tools and all the rest of it are supposed to be.
Yeah.
So not a secret room. All right. So we've talked about the fact that you have introduced multicultural characters and a strong sense of community. You have wonderful food. You have this terrific architecture stuff. Do you have like a little touch of magic in it? Or, how do you thread the needle between the mundane and the magic to kind of make it extra special?
I try as much as I can to emulate that, evoke that feeling that from the John Dixon Carr books, where you do, even though you 100% know in a John Dixon Carr book, you're gonna get the rational explanation, but you still get swept up in this feeling that it looks like there is this, that it has to be a ghost. How else did someone get through this brick wall and all of these things? And one thing that I need to figure out where this even came from, but the idea was floated that the Secret Staircase mysteries are like Scooby-Doo for adults, which I am embracing because I was a huge Scooby-Doo fan. And I love that because it looks like a ghost, but then you unmask the ghost at the end and it is a rational explanation. So obviously it's the adult version, but I really want to do what Secret Staircase, the Secret Staircase construction crew is doing, and bring magic into adults' lives. Because I feel like so much of that from childhood is lost, especially these last few years during the pandemic have just been so difficult in so many ways. And the first book in this series, Under Lock and Skeleton Key, was a book I had started writing it a few years before it really gelled. But it was only in the spring of 2020 that I really realized how to bring the story together, like how to bring the family and the magic and everything together. And it was right when the pandemic was starting. And, nobody, the world was just like, I wanted my comfort reading. And I was going on long walks in the hills above my house and, just thinking about everything. And the fictional small town I invented for the series is Hidden Creek, California. And that's because I discovered in the hills above my house, there is a hidden creek, which I've lived here for so many years. And I never knew about this hidden creek in the hills that runs through the hillside here. And so I made a fictional version of my town where there's actually room for houses to be a little bit bigger and to have some room to make these secret rooms, unlike my real Bay Area neighborhood. But I wanted to bring that spirit of magic and that sense of wonder that Tempest really, she became a stage illusionist because she wants to bring people that joy and that sense of wonder that they experienced as kids. And in a way, that's what her parents who founded Secret Staircase Construction did. And that's really what I want to do through these books, to bring back that sense of wonder we got when we were kids watching Scooby-Doo and reading Nancy Drew before, life got too heavy and, too much wild stuff going on around us, that you can escape for a few hours, getting that sense of wonder and that sense of magic there. So even if there's a rational explanation, maybe you can just wonder, is everything really explained or is there something happening? So it's just fun.
It is fun. I'm sure during the pandemic, many of us wish that the Secret Staircase Construction Company was a real thing. But there's one more element that I think makes these books really delightful. And there's a bookish element in here. There is love of mystery. And so in this new book, Tempest, who is now officially a part of the team, they are creating a classic mystery novel themed home interior. Their client is ready to celebrate her new life without her cheating ex-husband, mystery author Corbin Colt. Wow. So you give yourself room to actually talk about mysteries that you like, mystery authors that you like. So that's yet another element in the, sort of whole universe here of this book. You must have had a great time with that.
Yeah, it's so fun. The reason I need so many wonderful critique partners is they have to pull me back from my info dumps because I could write hundreds of pages just about my favorite mystery novels and my favorite authors, but obviously that has to just be a small thread in a book so that it doesn't slow down the action. But so what I do instead is that the backstory of Tempest and her childhood best friend, Ivy, is that they bonded as kids reading mysteries for kids. And then Ivy was the one who went on to become really well-versed in mystery fiction. And Ivy was working part-time for the Secret Staircase construction crew while studying to be a librarian. And so she also works part-time at the Locked Room Library, which is a fictional library that I invented for a short story that was published in Ellery Queen Mystery Magazine a couple years ago. But it was such fun that I had to add it to this series because it's a fictional private library that specializes in the golden age of detective fiction, especially locked room mysteries. And they have a train car in the library that's, modeled on Murder on the Orient Express, and a raven, and all sorts of, different nods to mystery authors in the library. And so Ivy it's one of the meeting spots in the book to go to the Locked Room Library and use classic mystery fiction as inspiration for how to solve that mystery. So that's something that's like a little, the conversation when the friends come together to discuss what are we missing, and then let's use classic mystery fiction to figure out ideas for what we might be missing in what's happening in our own lives. So it is fun because I've gotten to reread lots of my favorite books because I'm like, I know there's something in here that'll be fun to reference. And so in The Raven Thief, it's actually some Japanese mysteries, the Hankaku and Shin Hankaku mysteries. And I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing that. I totally might be mispronouncing that, but I love the logic puzzle Japanese mysteries. And lots more of those are being translated into English now. So, which is great. And they're being published more quickly than I can read them. So I haven't caught up with all of them that are being published, but yeah.
So I've just given you the basic setup, but what happens is that the now liberated wife from the famous mystery author, Corbin, who's a jerk, decides to have sort of an exorcism. And so people gather, and it's going to be kind of a seance with a circle of clasped hands, and nobody broke the circle, but somehow or other somebody dies, right?
Yep.
Or disappears. I can't remember which, to be perfectly honest. Which one is it?
Somebody dies. A dead body appears in the center of the seance table, even though nobody has broken hands. and the whole room was sealed as well. And they had just done a whole tour of the whole room. So he wasn't there in the room, and nobody's broken hands. And he was just seen like 100 miles away, just moments earlier. So I have multiple impossibilities. So.
Yes, you do. Right.
And there's even one more in there too, but I won't go
We're
into
not,
the other one. Yes, yes, yes.
We don't want to do that.
But it's all in the first, it's all in the setup though. So it's not a spoiler that it is this impossible murder at the seance, but yes.
Well, no, it has to be, because we've already talked about it.
Yes, yes, yes.
It's going to be. But what I think is so much fun is, that you've got these, as you say, you wanted to update the locked room mystery. You wanted to have a richness of character, which sometimes they didn't. You wanted to have, people like you, a multicultural family involved. You wanted to be able to bring in mystery authors and all the rest of it. And I think it's great. And you don't clutter up the book, which I think is hard when you're talking about so many different things. Not to, Harlan and I had a discussion, Harlan Coben and I had a really interesting discussion earlier today about if you have too many ideas. He says if he has a fault, it's that he has too many, plot elements and so forth. And I don't know that anybody's going to fault Harlan for anything, but obviously he's aware that if you take a bunch of ideas and, you kind of stick them all together, that it can get out of hand. And so you have to be very disciplined about what you're going to include and what you're not. He said he has a file, I love this, called Spare. And he finds,
I have that.
You okay? Sets it aside, and so far has not gone back to it. I did not ask him, but I regret that now, to whether he's ever taken something in Spare from one book and worked it into another book, because it fit there. We didn't get to that part of the discussion. So what do you do with your Spare file?
Well, I'm guilty of the same thing. I put it there and I don't know that I've ever come back to it. But what I have done that is the reason that the series finally gelled is that when I first started working on Tempest Story as a novel, I thought I was writing a standalone because what I was doing felt bigger than what I had done with previous books. But I put everything into one book. And I was so excited about all these ideas, and I sent it to my agent, and who was wonderful. Like, I love my agent dearly. And she read it and she got back to me and she's like, this needs a lot of work. Because she was and she gave me wonderful notes about trying to help figure out how to make it work, but I just didn't know how to do it. And so I set it aside. And then when the pandemic happened and I really figured out how to tell the story, I realized it is because this is not a standalone, this is a series. Because this way I don't have to talk about all of the things in one book. I can talk about fun elements to a little bit, enough that it's fun for the reader, but then I can explore it even more as the series goes on. And I'm just working on wrapping up the last revisions on the third book in the series now. But yeah, so for this series, I have that first standalone. Lots of the elements from there made their way into these books. But as opposed to things that I've cut from this book, I probably have about 10,000 words, a folder that save this for later. I've never gone back to that. I didn't go back to that for the third book in the series, but
well, you never know. I mean,
yeah, no, I have it. I still have it. So
right.
I could.
But I agree with you. I think there's such a richness of elements and material here that to do it as a standalone would be a mistake. Of course, you also have to have a publisher who agrees with you. That would be a good idea.
I've been very lucky. My editor is wonderful. So yeah, it's been great.
I can easily see. I mean, some series have great ideas, and they, there's trilogies, there's tetralogies. Some of them, can run on for several books. And, sometimes they kind of run their course, and then other times they go on for a really long time. I mean, over 33 years, we have been with authors through entire series. I mean, C.J. Boggs, every book he ever wrote, on and on. And a lot of it depends on how adaptable the series is to changing elements to new ideas. A lot of it depends on how enthusiastic the author remains, because if the author gets bored, then and sometimes circumstances in the world change and the series is just no longer feasible for whatever reason. It becomes outdated. I think thriller authors at the moment, are dancing on the edge of their, what do they do with the war in the Ukraine? We've moved, if you think about spy thrillers, have moved from Russia and China to the Middle East and then to the Far East. And then, now we're back to Russia. And, as if you're trying to write military fiction or spy fiction, if it's not historical, because they're great authors who write historical spy fiction and their world is established. But if you're trying to write something cutting edge, like Daniel Silva, for example, what do you do? And your book can't actually become irrelevant between your turning it in and the actual publication date, which is really scary, I think. But your series, this one, I think, is a keeper for certainly for a while. You have lots more things you can do to explore. And they don't have to stay in one small town in California either. I mean, if the Secret Staircase company does well, they can certainly, take their trade to more urban environment. I mean, San Francisco seems to me is in desperate need of all kinds of things at the moment. It's a city that has many problems, and maybe conceivably. Did you read today about the little library and the benches that some residents have put up? That somebody complained and the city came down on them and told them they had to buy like $1,500.
No, I didn't see that.
Well, it was a long article in the Wall Street Journal, and anyway, the little library was kind of the spark, because it's like 10 years old and it's really sweet and it has a little bench and the whole bit. And some, random idiot complained that it was there encroaching on the sidewalk. But I was pleased that the city supervisors decided that while they had to honor the idea of the permit, they were going to drop it to $5 and, and make it and sort of, like grandfather all this stuff in. So it was a really nice story. But on the other hand, you think about the city streets are basically latrines and there are people living in tents and, a lot of the houses are falling apart, blah, blah. So the Secret Staircase company could do some really good work in a lot of communities, which would broaden your palette and, keep you out of the Cabot Cove syndrome, which I think can be stifling.
There actually is I haven't begun working on the 4th book in the series yet, but the series is going to be continuing. And so I have an idea that is going to take them more into San Francisco, at least in the 4th book. So the home base will still be Hidden Creek, but sure. but I'm having fun. I have my notebook I haven't started writing that one yet. I have to finish book 3 first, but I have the notebook of ideas for book 4, and I'm still working on the challenges. I know the puzzle I want to create, like the magic trick that makes the locked room puzzle work. And I'm almost there with it. Like this is why, even though I've written so many short stories, I feel like I'm a very slow short story writer, because I have to get that idea right first before I can write something. And so since this series is all locked room puzzles, I have to get that puzzle right. And so even if I know nothing else about the story and can just discover it as I go, like you said, the puzzle has to work.
Yeah, you can't wing it. I mean, if the puzzle doesn't work, you can't really write yourself out of that corner. So you need to have it, and then the rest of it can kind of grow around it. So Patrick, come and join us and see if we have any.
Oh, wow. We've been chatting for a while. That went so quickly.
It flies right by, right?
Well, our friend Christina Estes, I think her ears were burning.
Oh, hi, Christina. We said nice things about you.
Yeah. She's great. She would like to know, question for Gigi, what is your favorite part of the writing process?
My favorite part of the writing process. Oh, that's tough, because there's so many favorite parts. I know that lots of authors really struggle with the writing, but are love it once they've written something. But as long as I haven't written myself into a horrible deadline, I love just being able to sit in. My desk is set up with this wonderful window in front of me. I would love it to be a rainy day and just sit there writing all of my ideas on paper. So I think that the moment where you're just getting to explore ideas of writing before I have to make those things good, when I can just think of the fun and the excitement of figuring out what the story is. So I'm going to say that ties with connecting with other book lovers, because if I was writing in a vacuum, then that would be nice, but not enough. And so when I get to, like, come and talk with Barbara tonight, about all of these books that we love, like, that gives me the energy to, I know that I have some revisions that I have to look over in the morning, but I'm going to get up and be like, that was just so fun to talk about this. And now I have to make sure that I get these revisions right.
Well, she says, as a follow-up, she says, you're ridiculously efficient and dedicated and focused about your writing schedule. What's the most challenging for you?
I do actually, I get up early in the morning. And so I've figured I would love to get up with the sunrise, but I've gotten myself one of those little alarm clock buzzer, not buzzer, like that vibrates on your wrist, because I don't want to be woken up by a horrible noise. And so it just is like someone shaking your wrist. So I do that to get up early. But once I'm awake, I love being up early. But I just have to get up.
Let's see. Well, we have a couple of people that are chiming in about Scooby-Doo.
I know.
It was such an interesting, strange show, wasn't it? I mean, there was a lot of kind of late 60s druggy subtext to it, if you wanted to find it, and then there were the funny episodes where they would have, like, Phyllis Diller would be the guest. Remember that?
Davy Jones one with the frog monster. That one was the best. The frog monster song. I've been looking for it everywhere to try to find it. So if anybody knows where I can watch that, let me know, because I've looked and I can't find it. I would love to watch that again.
And then Scrappy Doo, some of those episodes.
Oh, no Scrappy.
No Scrappy.
No.
You've got to draw the line somewhere, right?
Yeah, no Scrappy.
Let's see here. Yeah. Okay, what else do we have here, folks? When is the next Jaya Jones book coming out? You've kind of established that.
Well, for Jaya, there's actually, so I had, that's another series that I was writing before the Secret Staircase series. And I had a book research travel plans for the spring of 2020. So that obviously didn't happen. So Jaya's paused for now. And so I don't feel like I'm done with her, but I had to change gears when that research trip was canceled, but stay tuned.
She's temporarily on ice.
Yes.
Well, but now that you signed a contract for the Secret Staircase, you have to honor that. And
but I believe in magic, though. So remember, I can invent magical additional hours in the day to do it all. So
love it. What a good
but
idea.
yeah.
Well, this is great. Robin Purcell, our good friend, is
Hey, Robin.
Hi, Robin.
and she would like to know, is it possible to read these books out of order? Is it a big consideration there?
Well, there's only two, so it's, you can read The Raven Thief first, but I think that Under Lock and Skeleton Key, which just came out in paperback recently, I would start there. I mean, the mysteries are complete, but I think you miss some of the backstory of the characters, and so with only two books, I would recommend that you start with the first one.
Makes sense. Let's see. Let's jump over to YouTube here. Oh yeah, any TV or film option or interest so far?
There is nothing that is official that I can talk about, but I am hopeful that there will be something. And I'm sorry for the completely vague answer.
That's the way those deals go. But I think actually this series really cries out for something, even maybe the Hallmark Channel, never know, right?
Yeah, that would be exciting. I mean, I would love to, I think I can see it so visually, so many of the elements that would be fun.
I think so too. I mean, I think actually, constructing all the construction company work alone would be fabulous. But then, the food parts would also be wonderful. People love food shows, and be able to put together these wonderful feasts and so forth, I think would really lend itself to television.
In the backyard treehouse deck where everybody gathers.
Yeah, very nice. Plus casting would be fun.
Definitely. So who do you like to read, Gigi?
So I've mentioned already two of my favorites, Elizabeth Peters and John Dixon Carr. Deanna Rayburn is one of my current favorite authors.
Wonderful series, right?
Yes, yeah. No, the Veronica Speedwells, but her new her standalone Killers of a Certain Age was excellent as well. But yeah, so Deanna Rayburn is one of my favorite authors. Andrew Main, the thriller author, his Jessica Blackwood thrillers. So I love those books. So that's because I'm always looking for my magician characters. So he's Andrew Main is a stage magician from a family of FBI agents. So he wrote the character Jessica Blackwood, who is an FBI agent from a family of stage magicians. And so he flipped that, and those books are such fun. So that's another one. But I'm reading lots of classic golden age crime fiction now too. So if folks who are watching are interested in dipping your toe into locked room mysteries, but don't want to start with a whole book, there are so many great short stories that are locked room mysteries. Ed Hoke. There are many short story collections that the publisher Crippen and Landru has put together of Ed Hoke short stories, and some of those are locked room mysteries, and some are just really great puzzle plots. And there's also so many different locked room mystery collections of short stories to try on those. And then there's also, I'm reading Japanese mystery authors who are being translated into English for the first time. Seishi Yokomizo, who wrote the Detective Kendechi mysteries, and I don't know if there's 3 or 4 of them that have been translated into English so far. I've read 2 of them so far. So they're lots of fun, but so many Japanese authors doing really clever locked room mysteries.
So let me add that Ed Hoke is spelled Hoch.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, I know. It's just, if you're looking for it, you might spell it Hoke. But anyways,
Yeah.
Hoch. And Crippen and Landru has done over the years many, many anthologies of short fiction by a wide variety of authors. Really, great. What was a passion of Doug Green, and now passed on to another publisher, I think.
Yeah, Jeffrey Marks is now the publisher there.
Right. Barbara, do you remember, speaking of books featuring magicians, which is really interesting kind of sub-genre, do you remember Bob Blumley? Wasn't he our first ever customer?
He was our first, and he was also, he was in our first store. And then when we moved, the 2 times, he was always the first customer there too. He would arrange it to do that. Yeah. Sadly, he moved away, and I think he died eventually, but he was a lawyer here in Phoenix, and he had a real passion for crime.
Magic. He was an amateur magician, I remember.
Yeah.
And he was always looking for mysteries dealing with magic.
He was. Ellie Griffiths has a series set in Brighton with magicians. It's not her main Ruth Galloway, and now she's doing some other work. I'm going to be talking to Ellie on April 25th, I think it is. But anyway, she's written a series about, and I think it's in the 1950s, with kind of a music hall musician kind of thing.
Something.
Those are really fun. And isn't the 39 Steps, isn't there an illusionist in the 39 Steps, the John Buchan crime novel? I mean, I think so. I mean, it's one of those great classic, escape novels. But I'm pretty sure that there's a big finale in a, British music hall thing, and I think there's a magician involved. I haven't read it for years. It's a wonderful movie with Robert Donat.
Yeah. Okay. I need to go back to that. But yeah, no, magic it's such fun. I'm not really a magician. I just, play with it on stage, but I love that one of my magician friends, when I did a book tour a few years ago, we did a mentalism act together that when I was in my Southern California events where he lived, we did a mentalism act of the first 10 minutes of the event. And so that was such fun to be able to be a magician on stage then. So yeah.
You must have loved that. There's even a TV show called The Mentalist, if I remember right.
Oh, yes, yes. And then there was also in the 70s, The Magician with Bill Bixby.
Right. So there you go.
On the noir side, there's Nightmare Alley, which is a classic by William Lindsay Gresham. They've actually done a pretty decent film adaptation of it recently.
Oh,
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's
I
great.
should look that up.
Yeah.
Nightmare Alley.
So I want to say, Gigi, that, there are sometimes with writers, you have to practice your craft and mature a while before you can get to something, different. I always remind people that Rex Stout wrote some ungodly number of mysteries before he ever thought up Nero Wolfe. I think it was 49 books before he wrote his first Nero Wolfe book.
Wow.
To check, but a long time. And I do think, you've written these other series, but I think that, and working on developing, as a writer, it brought you to the place where you could do something more complex, like the Secret Staircase mysteries. And, it's wonderful.
Well, thank you so much.
And let me remind you all that we do have autographed copies of The Raven Thief. Isn't that a word tied with Raven? Is that one reason? Isn't Corbin a term for Raven?
Yeah. I got in all the wordplay, and I have all of the different Poe references in the book too. So when you're looking for things, I tried to weave all that in. So yeah.
You did an excellent job, right? And it doesn't, as I said before, all of these various elements don't clutter up the book. So, that's a remarkable achievement and takes a lot of practice to manage to get that balance right. Anyway, thank you for your time, Gigi. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for having me.
It was really a pleasure. And I hope we'll see you for your next book.
Yeah, that would be lovely.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Hello. We hope you're enjoying our programs and podcasts with authors. We'd like to expand them, and your help would be appreciated. Please make a donation at poisonedpenfoundation.org. 100% of the proceeds will go to help connect authors with readers in this difficult time. Thank you.